Hello, friends, and welcome into a little show and community that we like to call a level deeper around here. My name is Chad Miles. I'm going to be your host and conversational tour guide for this episode. One of the things that's been the most fun about this show is when I get to be wrong. I've talked about it fairly often, and we're going to talk about it in this episode a little bit, but my approach to these conversations is that I don't do a ton of research about someone. I don't send them a list of questions beforehand. We don't have agreed topics that we're going to talk about. I tend to keep things pretty vague. And it was just interesting. I started doing a little bit of research about my guest today, PJ Jenkins, and I came to a lot of conclusions that ended up just being wrong in our conversation. And I loved that feeling. The feeling of making some assumptions about someone and then ultimately having a meaningful one-on-one conversation and getting proven wrong and having your beliefs challenged and changed. And PJ just presented so many thoughtful perspectives during this conversation about shifting our fear to excitement. And he had this perspective on our gifts and the gifts that we've been given in life and how we use them that honestly impacted me greatly and made a big change in the way that I view some of my gifts and the way that I view myself and the things that I offer to the world. We had a great conversation about the power of silence and how we need that in our lives and how to create more space for some of the silence to reflect. We talked about creating things and we talked about fatherhood. And I really took a lot away from my conversation with PJ. He's a really interesting, engaging, dynamic guy. And I think you're going to take a lot from this conversation as well. PJ is someone that I've connected with a little bit on a more kind of professional way over the last year or so. And so it was really fun and meaningful just to get deep and have a more thoughtful, longer conversation. And so anyway, I'm going to step aside and let you listen to the conversation that I had with PJ Jenkins. I think you're going to love it. It's coming up next. Oh, and really quickly before we go to the conversation, I do have an ask for you this week. And it's not to leave a review. It's actually to think about, as you listen to this episode, is there someone in your life that you think would benefit from hearing it? As you listen to the topics, you listen to PJ, if you think about someone who, you know what, I think they'd really like this conversation or this podcast, would you mind just taking a second and sharing with them? Maybe send them the episode or tell them to check out some of the other episodes that maybe you've enjoyed. Sharing with a friend and spreading by word of mouth is one of the best ways to grow a show like this. And my goal is to get these conversations in front of more people, and I would love your help in doing so. All right, here's my conversation with PJ. Any questions for me? Have you done a podcast before?
Yeah, I've done a few, and this is
Okay.
dope, man, because I'm a planner. I'm a Capricorn man, so I'm a planner for sure. I like to have things kind of figured out when I go to restaurants. I look at the menu before I get there. Sometimes I even look at I go and look at the inside and make sure I know where I'm going. Where's the bathroom? I kind of like to know shit. So I like the fact that this is me stepping into an uncomfortable space of me not knowing what the hell we're about to talk about right now. So it's been great. And it's been a great couple of years in my life of transitioning and shifting my mindset to be okay in that space way more than I was in the past. So I'm super excited, man.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I also don't know exactly what we're going to talk about.
Sweet.
So that's, that's been, as I was just explaining to the person who was here filming, that's been some of my just approach and learning through these shows is that I continue to find the less that I try to control the outcome of the show, the better the natural outcome ends up being. And so, it is my role as host to come with some questions, or at least a question to start. And then from there, I just try to rely on being a good listener and being curious. And I continue to find that leads to a lot of really, really good conversations, and just allowing whatever the conversation that we're supposed to have today unfold has been a process that I've learned. So that's been kind of cool.
In the moment with you, brother. In the moment.
I love it. Are you able to, I guess you look good now. Try to make sure that our heads are relatively like similar height, or if you want to tilt your laptop down a little bit, is this a computer? Yeah. All right, brother, you ready? So right before we started recording, we were talking about, you were sharing with me how it's, kind of that the process of stepping into being uncomfortable in a show like this. So I've given people some looks behind the scenes, but I didn't send you a list of questions that I was going to ask you during the show. I didn't send you a list of topics that I was going to ask you or that we were going to talk about during the show. I share with you, frankly, I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about during the show. Tell me about being in your shoes in a situation like this, jumping into a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. You had mentioned that you are a natural planner. How do you respond and feel, now when you enter in these sorts of situations where you just don't know what's going to happen?
So I think over the last several years, I've understood the word and the idea of mindset shifting. And sometimes I think a good analogy is if you ever do an exercise and the next time you feel scared, be intentional about paying attention to how your heart feels or the butterflies in your stomach. Be intentional at that moment. It's a great exercise. And then the next time you feel excited, do the same thing. Try to feel the butterflies and how your heart beats. And what you'll notice in both is that your heart beats the exact same and that your butterflies in your stomach are the exact same. When I'm scared to death or if I'm excited, it all feels the same. So if you shift the mindset to say, I'm not afraid, I'm just actually excited, and you start to live in that space, it shows you show up a little bit differently when it's time for doing things that maybe put you in an uncomfortable space. So I've made it really an intentional point in my own life to be like, let's just change the mindset. Yeah, I might be a little scared. And the reality is, yes, I'm fucking petrified in certain situations. But if you practice, just like anything in life, if you consistently practice and are intentional about saying, okay, no, I'm not scared, I'm excited. No, I'm not scared, I'm excited. At some point, that's how you start to show up. So in situations like this, yeah, I'm a planner. I've always been the planner. You're supposed to send me 20 questions and I'm supposed to write them down and the best I can. And I'm supposed to come on here and present it very naturally. That's you're right. That's what I'm used to. And now it's like, okay, I got a podcast with Chad today. It's at 10 o'clock. I got no idea what I'm jumping into. I trust him because we're friends, but let's jump in. I'm excited. I might say that 5 times before we get on this call. I'm excited. So here I am, excited. Mindset shift.
You talked about, the way in which you show up. How do you feel like you show up differently when you apply this mindset shift of I'm excited versus if you're entering a situation with fear? How are you actually showing up differently?
Much different. So when you show up from a fear point of view, for one, it's a complete illusion. Fear has no tangibility about it. So when you show up in the fear space, you get to be a little bit more guarded. You get to be a little bit more tense. You get to be a little bit more resistant. And then that could really just kind of kill your blessings or kill all the things that you can uncover if you come into it a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more curious. You kind of get a chance to get into a learning space at that point. So I think that I've really noticed the difference between let's just come in, relax. Let's just come in and allow it to flow and be vulnerable. And what happens is my vulnerability attracts your vulnerability. And we have these very deep and meaningful and impactful conversations. But if I come in guarded, instantly, if I fold my arms in the room, probably within the next 5 minutes, you're going to fold your arms in the room. It's just how it works. And then we're just having a basic conversation, which is no fun for anybody.
No, I mean, this whole show has been built around that idea. And I can resonate with it so deeply, though, because it's also interesting that you said, you came into this conversation in particular with trust in me, and how it just makes me think about how anytime we're entering into a situation, a conversation, as you talk about trust, you talk about thinking about the other person, you mentioned body language. There's so much that we can gain from, who we're entering into conversation with, the setting, all of those things can impact a lot of how we feel entering into the conversation in the first place, and the level to which we're willing to be vulnerable and willing to be open. And if some of those things aren't right, do you find that affects your willingness to go deeper and to be vulnerable?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If the tables aren't really even, and we're not both there kind of sharing and allowing ourselves to be our most authentic selves in any kind of encounter, I can feel that instantly. And not that I walk away or are rude in any sense, but, I have a choice as to how I kind of show up and what I get out of these conversations. So if it's not reciprocated, or if I don't feel like there's some value add for both sides of us in this conversation, we can have a general conversation, but it'll probably be short-lived, in my opinion.
So in the interactions that you and I have had, and even in this conversation, very quickly, you can get the sense that you are someone who is reflective. You seem to think a lot about life and these types of interactions that you're having, and the way that you're perceiving some of, as you're just reflecting on and feeling your own heartbeat and thinking about approaching things from a standpoint of fear or excitement. Have you always been this sort of reflective person? Has this element of thinking about your life and seeking this deeper meaning and deeper interaction, has it always been part of your story?
No, not at all. I've been a reckless mess plenty of times in my life. I've been, reckless and careless. I got a whole bunch of those stories, man. But I think it's those stories that have shaped me. I will say that I've always been one of learning. So even in my reckless times, I have at every single time, excuse me, at every single time, there's always a space where I sit down and I say, okay, now let's look in the mirror and let's, have some accountability for how this situation went down. So I've always been a very accountable person, almost to a fault. But no, it always wasn't there. It was something that I grew into, experiences that got me there, and having, a strong spiritual connection got me there. A lot of solitude got me there, and really just having some good hard conversations and being okay with having hard conversations with myself and sometimes with some mentors, and allowing them to, analyze and give me some good constructive feedback that I can take and say, this life is all about tweaking it. I call it like an equalizer. You're always kind of shifting here and there to kind of make things work for you in the best way you can. And I've been a really good student of consistently tweaking and being okay when it's not perfect. And that gives me a chance to grow and learn and try some new things and be in that space of imperfection, which, quite honestly, I enjoy that space.
What were some of the difficult conversations that you found you had to have with yourself?
Oh my God. Shit, where do we start? It's only going to be an hour here. I think that, like most, we live in this fear of failure. So I've definitely had some, fears of failure conversations, insecure moments of, am I enough? Can I do it? What will people think? So I'm human just like anybody else. I might show up and from the outside looking in, I might really seem like I got all my shit together. But a lot of times it's a work in progress. I'm always a work in progress. So I've had many moments, where I've sat down and didn't have things figured out. And I just did my best to either handle it the best I could, or sometimes not. Sometimes it was handled in a terrible way, but that was a learning situation in that situation too.
This shift. So you mentioned, there was this period in your life where I think the word you used was reckless. and now I think of the word reflective, and those are what feel like maybe two very different words. Talk about a little bit more about this shift. Was there something in particular in your life that happened, or, what caused you to move from this reckless stage of life to the more reflective PJ that I'm having a conversation with now?
Yeah. So I think some of it, man, was that I realized, I would say early in my 20s and 30s, I lived this character life, this, my name is Paul Jenkins. My nickname is PJ. So I would say for probably 15, 20 years, I lived the PJ, which really kept a lot of people away. It didn't allow people inside. And really, Chad, what I felt from those moments, and again, from the outside looking in, I had all the material things that you could ever want. It looked great from the outside, but most nights I would come home, I'd cry myself to sleep. I would be in a dark space. I would be living very, very unfulfilled moments. And it just got to a point where I was like, I'm tired of feeling like this and living like this. Something's got to change. But I just didn't realize, I didn't know what it was that had to change to get me out this unfulfilled moment. So I started to try to even do more things to give me more abundance and more abundance. Well, maybe if I get more cars, or maybe if I open up more businesses, or maybe if I date more women, or whatever it is, it was just this abundance of trying to be more fulfilled. And that was the exact opposite of what I should have been doing. What I knew to be true is that you got to go inside. And that's what I was afraid of. I was really afraid of going inside, because sometimes you start to see things that you aren't ready to see. And there was a moment, man, I remember shit like it was this morning, man. I remember there were days where I would go into my bathroom in my house and not want to cut the mirror, not want to cut the light on, because I didn't like the man that I was at the time. I didn't even want to see myself. And there was a moment where I went in there and I just sat on the ground and I cried and I cried. And I'd lost my faith. I was very unfulfilled. I didn't know what to do. I called my sister. She was like, meet me at church on Sunday. I sat in the car for about 40 minutes before we walked in, because I was petrified to go in. I literally had to walk me in, sit me in the front row. And I cried the entire sermon. Got prayed. My pastor prayed with me. And that was the day I remember. That was the day things started to change. I started to say, okay, here's day one. I'm going to start working on me. I'm really going to start working on me. And when I started to do that, I started to really see a big difference. And the first day I started working, I was just being open, honest, and vulnerable and transparent with people. And that started to allow love and camaraderie, friendships and connections into my space. And I started to see myself be more fulfilled. I started to root for my friends, help my friends win. And I started to say, wow, I'm having this sense of fulfillment because I'm here showing up, helping you be great. Well, so that was much different. Any other time, I was trying to win all the time. Well, when you're trying to win all the time, it gets a little lonely at the top. It gets a little bit lonely when you're running a sprint and nobody's in this race with you. And I was running that race for a long time. So in my mind, yeah, I'm winning. I'm winning every race, but I'm at the finish line with nobody there but me. So are you really winning? So when I really realized that winning isn't winning unless you're bringing people with you, unless you're helping people win. And that's when I first started to feel a sense of fulfillment. Oh my God, like I'm helping my friends win. I'm rooting my friends. I'm like genuinely interested in what they're talking about. I want to help them grow. And that's when it started to make sense for me. Really did.
You talk about this day where you go to church, you pray with your pastor, and you start to be open and honest.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Because it sounds like that wasn't maybe a part of your life before that. How did that process feel when you started to be open and honest? I've got to imagine with yourself and with people around you. What did that feel like?
I think at the beginning, I was still a little bit afraid because, there's still this sense of, what will people think? And obviously, at some point I had to get to the stage where I'm like, you can't care what people think. You have to just authentically be yourself. Just show up as yourself. And when I really started to do that, even in the beginning, it started to feel like bricks off my shoulder. I started to really feel like, wow, like this is a great conversation. Every time I got off the phone with one of my friends and it was like, we were supposed to check in for 5 minutes and we talked for an hour, I would get off feeling just stoked, really amped up about the conversation. So it really was immediate that I started to feel a sense of fulfillment by like really giving myself, my true self to people and not being able to, share my failures with people, share my stories with people, things that didn't work out how I planned. That was a big change for me also. In the beginning, it was like, you want everybody to think you're great. You want everybody to think everything you touch is gold. And, especially at this point in my life, I'm like, for one, that's not realistic. And for two, the only way you grow, the only way you get to be at the level that you're seeking is to go through these challenging times in life. So I started to embrace those challenging moments and started to be honest with people about things that I was dealing with. And I started to see this sense of like, oh man, I experienced something just like that. Or, man, what did you do here? The relationships grew, man. It was very beautiful awakening for me to get to that point in my life.
So you talked about this this character of PJ that you felt like you were for a period of your life, where was that character built from? Why was this character that you were portraying? Why was it, you know, the way that it was? Like, what had you seen or witnessed, or what led you to believe this is the character that I have to play in my own life?
So it really was, thought it was reality for a long time because I lived in a space. I was an athlete growing up. I was a big time party promoter going through college. So I did things at a massive level, at basketball scholarships. I opened up restaurants. I did all this exciting stuff, man. So that's how I was viewed. The story I think it is, other people might be like, that's not really how I viewed you, but that's what I thought. That's really how I thought I was viewed, was, wow, like I got my shit together, like floating. I got all these things. I got all these, I got the nice house and the cars and the motorcycles and got the hot chicks and I got the businesses and I played basketball. I can dunk. And it was all these things that kind of built me up to think like, I'm pretty damn cool, And,
yeah.
Not that I don't think that I'm cool now, because I do, but it's a different kind of cool. Different kind of cool, man. It's the real cool.
And going through your life being that character, I've got to imagine for a while it probably felt good to be able to do all of these things and have people look at you and be like, oh man, PJ's cool. Yeah. He's the guy. Yeah. He's a fun guy to be around. He's got all these things. Did it feel good for a while, and then all of a sudden there was just something that felt different, or maybe it didn't feel good?
It's I've never been on drugs, but I think the best way to describe it was like a drug. It's a good high for a minute, and then you come down, and then you go home, and then you're empty, and then you got to do it all over again tomorrow, just like a drug. You seek that. Wow. And I think that a lot of it was that, it was great. It was gratifying. It was self-fulfilling for a minute. And then you get home and the people who were typically at your house, at the party, at this, at that, you're like, don't really have anything in common with them, but they came to a cool party and everybody's really fun here. But like, there's no substance. There's no conversation. There's no building. There's no love. It's just cool vibe. PJ brought this cool party. PJ brought this, and it's over now, and now PJ's back home feeling empty again. So it felt good for temporary, and I didn't know that going through it, that something was going to have to change. I didn't. I was very aware that I was feeling unfulfilled. I just didn't really understand at the time that the only way to get out of that is to be honest. And I was kind of running from that for a little bit.
What was your fear around being honest? If you started to be honest with yourself, if you started to be honest with people around you, if you started to maybe peel back some of the facade of this character, what were you afraid of?
I think, I at the time, I think it was fear of judgment, fear of not looking like I had my stuff together. I think that was the biggest thing. What do people think if they knew I wasn't as successful, or if they knew that I didn't have as much money, or if they knew that, I'm, depressed in the evening hours, facing my own battles. And I wasn't ready to test that with the market to say, hey guys, everything's stripped off. This is the real me. What do you guys think? And now that's the only way I walk around, everything's stripped off. This is the real me. Take it or leave it. But yeah, it was definitely a fear of judgment, and even, I guess for your own mental, is telling yourself that you're not doing well. So it's like, if I say that to people, is that the reality that I'm not showing up, in a grand way? So I didn't. I fought it for a long time. But when I tell you, when I broke through, a lot changed. A lot changed. Relationships changed.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm going to use the word funny of how we do that to ourselves, but really it's more like painful. How we
self-inflicted.
And we think that if we start to peel back some of those layers and show who we are, that people are just going to be like, whoa, we don't want that. We don't accept you. We want you to fit into this very particular box. And I don't want to see that, PJ, because unless your experience is different, every time I find that if I get afraid of sharing with people that, hey, maybe I'm going through a period of business where I'm struggling and I'm not doing as well as I wanted to do, or maybe financially, I'm not doing as well as I would like to be. And we go through some of these periods and I'm like, oh, I'm so terrified to tell anyone about that, because people are I'm not sure, they're going to change the way they think of me, or they're going to think, oh, Chad's not responsible. Chad doesn't have it all together. And yet whenever I just let people in, the people that truly love me and care about me, that's not the response. That's not how they come back to me. It's not what they say. And yet still, every time I go through that exercise, I'm still like, oh, I'm so afraid to let people know. I'm just like, why do we do that to ourselves?
Every time it's self-inflicted. I did something probably about a year ago. I call it my wins journal. That's right. I used to keep in my bag here, every single place that I go. It's my win journal. And I treat it like it's my trophy case. And it's twofold. So I put all my wins in there, all my wins. So when times get challenging in my life, sometimes I kind of revert back to be like, okay, I've shown up, I've done some great things. I can continue this journey, because life is going to life every once in a while, where it kind of knocks you off your pedestal. But one of the other things that
how do you define wins?
I would think things that are just, fulfilling. I call it, sometimes there's small wins. Go get your dry cleaning in the morning. It could be as small as that, things that you accomplish throughout the day, because I think that we spend so much time in our life playing defense and reacting to how the world delivers the world to us, that we sometimes get to an end of the day and we're exhausted. And in the analogy of like sports, if you play a game and you're exhausted because you played defense the entire game, and you look at the scoreboard at the end of the day and you have no points on the board, it's a very frustrating feeling. So if you can set yourself up for some tiny little small wins throughout your day, tiny, it could be just, hey, I'm going to pick up XYZ. I'm going Christmas shopping today. It's on my list, knocking it off my list. Small, easy wins. I call them layups. Basketball layups are the easy baskets. Give yourself 10, 15 layups throughout the day, and you can actually write those things down. So when the day gets by and the day gets challenging, you could look at those things. Got a lot of shit accomplished today, though. I put some points on the board today. And if you're not making yourself get in the habit of putting points on the board, you'll be playing defense all day and you'll be exhausted with no wins. So you have to be intentional about putting wins on your life scoreboard at some capacity throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be grand. You don't have to open up a $10 million business to say, hey, I won today. And we do that as human beings so much that we discount the small baby steps and the wins that we make, because we're so, enamored with trying to get the big grand slam. But you know what? Hitting the base hit gets you on base. And having a bunch of base hits, you can actually end up scoring if you hit a bunch of base hits. So I really tailor my day now, not having to so much go after the grand things every single day. The grand things are there. I spend a lot of time making sure I just get on base. Let's just get on base. Let's get in the habit of getting up to the plate and getting on base and playing this game of life like that. And it seems to be very, very it's an advantage for me as I navigate this thing of life. Like, I'm used to getting on base, strike out sometimes, but keep swinging the bat.
And you can't hit a home run, or I guess you can hit a home run. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but at some point you've got to be on base to round the bases, right? I guess that maybe the analogy for sports would be you can't go around and touch home plate without touching first base first. And so that idea that those grand wins are really probably just a culmination of all of those little base hits, all those little layups end up being, you can't set a scoring record without a bunch of layups, a bunch of just simple 2-pointers. And it's interesting that you also are intentional about writing these things down and keeping this wins journal. Tell me about that process of writing it down. How does that make it maybe feel different than just accomplishing those things throughout your day?
Sometimes just getting it out of your head is critical. We only have so much space up here. And if it's just cluttered all the time, it's like a computer. If you don't at some point wipe the hard drive clean or take these files and put them somewhere else and compress them, then the computer won't work. in our brains and our mindset is the same thing. I have a wins journal, I have a fear journal, I have a daily journal. I have like 6 or 7 journals that I write in throughout the day. And at nighttime before I go to bed, I write into my journal just to get things off my head. But it's shown up for me for a couple of reasons. As far as the wins journals, I'm able to go back and look and be proud of myself. And it's okay to be proud of myself. Again, this world where they call it bragging or you're arrogant. No, proud of myself. I set out for a task. I accomplished it, and I'm proud of myself. And it's okay to be proud of yourself. So that's one thing. It allows me to look at something and be like, great, I set out to do something and I accomplished it. It's a proud moment for myself, proud of my achievements. And then I have a fear journal. A fear journal is sometimes dark. Sometimes you got to write in there all your deepest, darkest moments. I write that down. And the best thing about the fear journal, that's one of my favorite journals. And it gets dark. It gets really dark sometimes. But the best thing about it is if you look in that fear journal in a month or 3 months or 6 months, what you'll notice is that most of the things that you feared the most never happened. They never happened. And you could actually, you start to develop a habit of understanding that when fear comes up, if you get in the habit of writing it down and get back in the habit of revisiting it, you start to notice, wow, some of my deepest, darkest fears never happened, and it starts to take the power out of the fear as the fear starts to come into you every single day, because it does, but it starts to take the power out of it for you. So I've gotten in the habit of writing my fears down and looking at them and saying, well, those 15 fears that I had last month didn't happen. So how do you think I'm going to show up today when a fear shows up for me? Instantly, my mentality is going to go back to my daily routine of writing my fears down to say, PJ's probably not going to happen. It takes a lot of the power out of it for me. So it allows me to kind of, take an extra step toward that confidence, that removing doubt kind of feeling. It's a great exercise.
Now the fear journal is so interesting because whenever you hear about journaling or people recommend it, it's almost always about something, I'm going to say positive. We're trying to think about gratitude. We're thinking about jotting down wins. We're thinking about journaling about things that we want to create in our life or manifest. You don't often hear people talking about the sort of negative things or something like fear and writing down those dark things that you're thinking and that you're feeling. That's a very different process. Is that something that you came up with yourself, or where did that come from?
It is. And it is a concept that most people won't do or haven't done. I've never heard it actually until I started doing it myself. But one of the reasons I think is that nobody wants to face the fear. So if you actually have to sit down, think about it, write it down, you have to consistently be in it. And most people don't. They want to be exactly the opposite of that fear. So, if you're able to say, I'm getting it off my mind, I'm going to write it down, put it away. And literally, I write in it every single day because we have things that we're afraid of or scared to do. So I just write it down and put it away. The 1 sentence, 2 words, whatever it is, but getting in the habit of going back and looking at it. And I think that's the key. People write in their gratitude journals. I have one, write my fear journal, my win journal. But if you don't go back and actually read them and look at it and look how far you've come, they can still work to get it off your mind. But I think it works a little bit more and a little better if you go visit it, so you can actually give yourself some, a little pat on the back.
And that feeling of just recognizing all these fears that you've had that didn't actually come to fruition, that they didn't happen, they never came to be. I mean, I could see that being a really powerful thing. It's really interesting. So
I would say you can get caught in your mind when you get caught up in fear. If you don't get in the habit of going to revisit it to realize that it didn't happen, you'll get in the habit of saying, well, I'm just going to start living in fear. I'm going to start living in fear. So you have to figure out, which habit do you want? Do you want to get out of this fear? Because it is an illusion. It is not something that I can grab and touch or taste. It is in your mind. So if you get it out of your mind onto paper and realize once you go back and relook at it that it hasn't happened yet, at some point, just like any habit, you shoot 1,000 free throws, you're going to get good at free throws. If you start looking at your fear as they never happened, guess what's going to happen? You're going to start realizing that most of my fears have never happened. I'm going to start being a little bit more fearless because that shit doesn't happen. And when it does occupy my mind, it stops me and it cripples me. But if I can develop a habit of realizing that it never happens, what happens? The opposite of that. You start to go a little bit further. You start to be fearless.
So it's so interesting. I feel like this is a reminder of one of the reasons why I don't do a ton of sort of like research or prep on people. When this morning, as I was checking out some of like your social media profiles, a lot of your messaging, like on your Instagram is around like your profile image says the words "fuck fear," and a lot of the content is around like not giving any fucks and having that approach to fear. And I think I was making some assumptions that like, well, I don't know. Like in my conversation with PJ this morning, I feel like he's going to be like, nah, just, fuck fear. Like just rise above it. Fear doesn't exist. It's not real. And I made some assumptions about the kind of conversation that we might have. So I've got to share with you that I'm, in some ways, surprise in a pleasant way, in a good way, that we're having this conversation and you're sharing this relationship that you have with fear, and it's something you very much recognize, you very much honor, you it sounds like you reflect on it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how we can make these assumptions about people, and it's a good thing, maybe just a good reminder for all of us of why making assumptions about people is just nowhere near as effective as having a conversation with someone. But B, tell me about this concept of or this idea of fuck fear. And when that's on your profile, what does that mean to you? Because the conclusion that I was coming to of what that meant is very different than the conversation that we're having about fear that we've been having for the last, half hour.
So the whole concept, I wrote a book called Fuck What They Think several years ago. And it was really to help my own personal demons inside my own head, telling me that people wanted me not to succeed. And I think some of that was true, but I think only the most of it was my own internal insecurities telling me that I couldn't do it. So I wrote a book. I would say it was either therapy at the time or write a book. So at that time I wrote a book. It was my therapy. So I really wrote it for me. And then it just kind of developed a life of its own. But as far as the fuck fear is concerned, it's like, I can't come in here and say it's not real. I can't come in here and say I don't deal with it. I can't come in here and say anything like that because it is real. And we do face it. Most people face it. Everyone has dreams and aspirations in their life. And most of the time when they don't get there, they get caught in that deception phase. And they're excited at first and then all the other stuff comes in. That's usually where dreams die. So I know what it's like to stall out and not pursue something. And I also know what it's like to do it scared and then get to the other side and live in the identity of, transforming into the identity of what I wanted to do with life. So I know both sides of it. And my social feeds are really there to help people say like, it's okay to be scared, but do it scared anyway. And what you'll realize is if you don't do it, you'll always stay scared, or you'll always be in this situation. If you do it, you at least have a 50% chance of a different outcome. So fuck fear, do it anyway. And it's really just a constant push to people because, much like anything in life, I live a very disciplined, consistent daily routine life of making sure that I practice fuck fear, making sure that I practice journaling, because you just cannot be good at anything if you just don't practice. Having a certain level of, natural ability will only get you so far, and some daily practices and disciplines will get you a little bit further. And I've really grasped the idea of that. So my fuck fear is just a daily, constant practice. And although that will listen, I don't have a lot of followers. It's not about picking up a bunch of followers. It's about if one person hears it. And typically I get, an email, a text message, a call every so often saying, man, I needed to hear that today. Man, that was right on point. That's what does it for me. I'm not trying to sell anything. Most of my books that I have, I give them away. I've probably given away way more than I've ever sold. It wasn't the point to sell. It was the point to be an impact and to be an inspiration to people. And that, my social feeds have proven to be an inspiration to a few people.
Is this process of creating, do you find creation to be therapeutic for you as well?
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm a creative soul. That's who I am. I eat, live, and breathe creativity, from playing guitar to sports to I have this art studio in my house and writing books and designing. I'm doing my first hotel project right now, so I'm always in that creative space. And yeah, it is definitely my outlet. I wish I could spend 100% of my time there. Sometimes I gotta run a business side of it and go to the other side of the brain. But I spend the majority of my time on the creative side.
Yeah, because as you talked about, I was either going to write a book or go to therapy.
Yeah,
I continue to find that it's like the kinds of things that it is. I'm a huge believer in it. I go to therapy. I also continue to find that a lot of, I think, the reason that I create and the reason that I want to share the kinds of things that I share, the reason that I host this podcast and I want to host and share conversations like this is because it's therapeutic for me. Like, selfishly, I want to share the kinds of things, and the things that show up on my feeds are messages that I need. And these types of conversations and asking you about fear and asking you about excitement versus approaching things with fear, like, it comes from a place of curiosity, and also from a selfish nature. It comes from, I need to learn these things. I need to learn how to embrace these things. I have a difficult relationship with fear. And so I've just found that creating and sharing is often, I'm just getting things out that are on my mind that I'm struggling with. And what do you know? There's other humans out there who also feel the same way. And it's a very therapeutic experience. So it sounds like that's the same for you. You're creating things that you need to hear. You're sharing things that you need for yourself. And in doing so, I've got to imagine you benefit from it. And if you get to impact someone else, then that's a cherry on top, right?
That is my purpose. And I've learned that, for a long time, I rejected what I called my purpose, to inspire, because it came quite easy for me to be an inspiration. And I just figured, since it became easy for me, that couldn't be my gift. My gift has to be something that I worked my tail off to get, to be able to share. And it just really wasn't until recently that I was like, wow, I've been given this gift that, God has allowed me to go out here and experience life in such a great way that I'm able to extract a lot of things. It would be terrible if I just hoarded it. So it is my job that I go out and I extract and I live and I experience and I internalize it, and I'm able to give it away. And I've found that my blessings, this thing's not plugged in. Sorry, man.
I'm gonna plug in a charger so we don't lose PJ.
Right. Hold on, man. Got it in, plugged in.
All right, are we charging up?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. Where was I?
Okay, so I'm going to have you tilt your screen down a little bit again, just so that your head's a little bit higher in the screen. Yep, that's great.
Good.
All right, so we're back after that's the nature of these interviews are always recorded virtually, and we always have technology. I had a recording just the other day, and it was the technology on my end that was causing issues. So this happens frequently. In what you were just saying, one thing that really stood out to me, and actually it gave me chills as you were saying it. You talked about this idea of, we think that our gifts have to be something that we work really hard for, and something that's really challenging, and it's like we have to earn them. And it gave me chills, because I've often been told that one of my gifts is my ability to listen, and my ability to just hold space for people and provide a level of comfortability for them to share their stories, and to, just to ask thoughtful questions, but essentially to listen. And I've always thought, well, that's not a gift. Like, I didn't do anything for that. I didn't go out and conquer and accomplish something really notable and put in all this work to be able to do that. And so I've always discredited the fact that people will say that that's a gift that I have, or I haven't valued it. It's just kind of like, well, I don't know, that's just part of who I am. I'm going to go focus on other things that I'm not sure I have to earn or accomplish. It just really resonated with me when you described viewing our gifts in that way, because that is something that I have not thought of before.
Yeah, it's something that's new to me. And really, when I recognized it as I received this gift and it's my responsibility to share this gift. And then it goes back to having that fulfilled, mindset or living in fulfillment where now I get to receive something from whether it's travel, whether it's home, whether it's relaxation, whether it's dream or reading or whatever creative endeavors that I'm a part of in any of my passions, I get to receive this. And now I get to take that same gift and give it to somebody else. It's such a sense of fulfillment for me. So I'm watching as I go back when I was living in my earlier life of not having been fulfilled, I was rejecting my gifts. And now living a fulfilled life, I'm receiving my gifts, but I understand the responsibility of receiving gifts is to give it away to help others. And that's just the nature of life and growth and how people, the cycle of life works for me is I receive, I give, you receive, you give, and the cycle of life kind of grows and grows. If I could be a part of that spoke some kind of way, job well done.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing because going back to that earlier version of your life where it sounds like you were in that mode of, I have to go accomplish things. I have to achieve things. I have to build more. I have to get more money. I have to get the nicer things. And those are going to be my gifts. And yet your gifts were with you all of the time. They were with you from day one. And it just took you slowing down a little bit and recognizing, oh, wait, I already have what I need to be able to impact people and inspire people. And I don't have to go do something different to gather it or achieve it.
No, you hit it around the nose. You slow down long enough. And that's one of the number one things I did. If I could say the difference between PJ 20s, 30s, even 40s, and now PJ approaching 50, one of the biggest things is daily solitude. I spend a lot of time in solitude. I spend a lot of time in reflection. I spend a lot of time, reading, writing, being in a space where I say, listen to the quietness. Because when you listen to the quietness, it's so loud. But if you are out here chasing life so fast, you're missing the game. You end up missing the lessons. You end up missing those whispering moments. But if you just sit for a little bit and just kind of listen, a lot of your answers are right there in front of you. You just haven't taken the time to listen. So I spend every single morning part of my daily routine is just complete silence. Some of that's in the form of a meditation, and some of that is just a daily walk around, my neighborhood in the morning for an hour, just to kind of just listen, appreciate, and show gratitude. We weren't guaranteed that we could wake up this morning, and the fact that we did, I owe some gratitude to that. So I spend time there.
It's my experience with that solitude and with that peace and with that quietness is similar to what we've talked about. I think for many people and myself at times as well, there's a fear of going into that quiet space because there's a fear of what we might find. And there's a fear of having to spend time with ourselves and who we really are. And if we get really quiet, the real stuff's going to come up and we're going to start to feel some things and we're going to start to work through some things and we're going to get in contact with those fears that we have. And that's a scary feeling for people. And I feel like that's why we live in a society that tends to prioritize busyness, prioritize noise, prioritize anything but getting into this quiet space. And yet that limits us so much from so many things, but ultimately I think it limits us from reaching our highest potential as individuals, as human beings, and our deepest understanding of ourselves, right?
That's right. It's interesting you say that. We train ourselves to be so busy. I just got back on social media, so I took a full year off from last August till almost like September of this year. And I said, I completely took the icon off my phone. I wasn't checking Instagram. I wasn't checking anything social at all. And what I learned a year later, for one, I looked up all the things that I had accomplished personally and professionally and eternally over that past year was incredible when I took myself off from what I call just being distracted. And when I got back on Instagram, one of the things I noticed was not much changed. So when you sit on here every single day because you're afraid of missing something, or you want to put something out there to be relevant, I could take a full year off, and my growth over the last year has been more growth that I've had probably over the last 10 years of just me saying, I kind of just shift my focus to do something else a little bit more productive for myself. Be it on Instagram, I get it for the people who have to use it to make money, and it's their job to be on Instagram. But for me, more of a novice who's just on Instagram, it just didn't do anything for me. So, and not that like now I'm back on it, I'm having fun with it. But when it became a distraction, I started to see less productivity, and I was more concerned about what the hell Puff Daddy was doing than what the hell I needed to be doing. It's like, wait a minute, I don't even know this guy. So having this, I call it my toxic, it was a toxic detox, social media detox over the last year proved to be a very good exercise for me too.
How has your perspective changed now that you've brought it back into your life? How are you finding that you just view it differently or use it differently after you took that detox period?
Using my gift now, in the past, it was just kind of random, talking to certain people or whatever. But now I've used it to use my gift to inspire. I don't care about followers. I don't care about algorithms. I don't care. That's not my motivation. My motivation is that if someone listens to what I'm saying, because I just received a gift that morning that I want to say, whether it's a rant or whether it's something that's, top of mind, something I wrote down that I just want to genuinely share. I think how I show up on Instagram is a little bit different than how I did it in the past. In the past, it was just a habit. It's on my phone. I got some downtime. Let me pull up Instagram. Now it's very intentional about I'm on it to actually share my gift.
Yeah, that's cool. I think sometimes it just goes to prove like that detox is a version of solitude. It's a version of being in the quiet, being in the silence, and how if sometimes we just need to pull away from some of these things and revisit. How do we feel? Are we using them in appropriate ways? How do we feel when we interact with these things? I've been having a recent kind of internal conversation of I've always been a sports fan, and particularly I went to Michigan State. I'm a Michigan State sports fan, and it's been interesting noticing myself though. I'm pretty religious about. I want to watch all the Michigan State basketball games and football games, and I'll start to notice there's been a few times recently where, especially with basketball games, my wife will be like, "How's the game? Are you enjoying it?" And I'm like, if I'm honest, I'm like, no, I'm really not. I get stressed. This game has no effect on my life, and I'm not really even enjoying the actual act of sitting here watching it. And so that is an example for me where sometimes we find ourselves just going through the motions and we're just doing the things because, I don't know, we've always done them. And if we stop and really take notice of, this goes back to the conversation that we opened up with about fear and excitement. If you really take notice of how do you feel in that moment? How does your body feel in that moment? How is it reacting? It can tell you a lot about how you're actually experiencing that thing. And so anyway, I've started to just think more about I've gone through the motions of just watching sports my whole life. This is what I do. I'm going to put it on my calendar, devote my time to it. And I'm like, I don't even think I enjoy it. I don't think I feel good when I do it. And maybe I could make better use of my time. It's just, That was a funny example that I've been thinking of recently.
It's funny because I have a client that I coach on Fridays. And one of the things I asked her, I said, let's talk about happiness. And, she said, well, how do you describe happiness? I said, think about, the last 3 or 4 things that you did that really brought some joy to your life. And she goes, okay. I said, and do that all the time. She was like, wow, you make it sound so easy. I was like, happiness sometimes can be a choice. And a lot of times we put ourselves into a space of being unhappy because we don't, really recognize that those moments of being happy that we had, that we can actually replicate those moments. We spend a lot of time in the dark side. Happiness is there. You got to practice.
Yeah, I like to think of happiness as like a habit or culmination of habits.
Absolutely.
If you, I don't necessarily think that we just choose to be happy, but we can choose to engage in certain activities and certain habits that I think will contribute to us becoming happier people over time. And so making those small choices, getting those small wins, those little things start to build up, and they may create what we feel as happiness, but it's a lot of times it's just small little habits that we participate in on a consistent basis. But if you never stop to go into the solitude to think about what does make me happy, what does bring me joy, then we miss the opportunity to develop those habits and take part in them in the first place.
And you should really, come back to me, Mr. Write things down all the time. Writing down, what makes you happy. The last time you were happy and how did you feel about it? This game of life isn't easy. It shows up every single day as a challenge here and obstacle here. But if we're really not like in the space where we're analyzing, what made us feel sad, what made us feel happy, what made us feel joyful, and let me start to, bring things into my daily routine that keep me in that environment. Otherwise, again, like I said before, you'd be playing this game of life in a defense mode, and there's nothing rewarding or fulfilling in being in that space all day. So showing up in a space where you could say, this is what makes me happy. I do this every single day. It's a small, simple thing, but it makes me happy. I'm going to do that every single day. Create your environment. Create the things that make you happy, and you have the ability to do that. You really do.
PJ, as we start to wrap up our conversation, I want to talk about fatherhood because it's something that we were chatting about a little bit before. You were blessed to welcome your second child into the world recently, and so you were sharing with me that you've got there's a 20-ish year gap between your two children, right? And
21 years.
Talk to me about how you were sharing a little bit about how I had asked you how's fatherhood, and you were sharing some of the perspective of how it's very different this time around. So I guess I'll kind of repose that question to you about what has your experience with fatherhood been like?
So mind you, at this point, all the way up until about a couple of years ago, I was in full retirement. I had a grown kid. There was no way I was going to have a new child. And my wife and I laugh about it because when we met, that was one of the first conversations. You want kids? I was like, oh, no. Definitely don't want any more kids. Don't really care about getting married again. So but she was so gentle and patient with me that she just kind of, rode the wave with me until the other side came out. But, several years later, here I am with a newborn at home. He's a month-old Sunday. He's the joy of my life. My daughter and I have been glued to each other's hips for the last 21 years. I spoke to her just even before I decided to, intentionally, start to try to have children. I talked to her. I said, hey, Nadia, thinking about doing this again. It's been me and you for 21 years. What do you think? And she loves my wife. She goes, oh my God, yes, please. I want a brother so bad. She's got two little sisters with her mom. She goes, I want a brother so bad. And the best thing, it touches my heart to even think about it. When she says, Papa, I've had you for 21 years of my life to myself. I'm okay to share you. And that's what did it. And I had the conversation with Jordan, my wife. And I said, you know what? I'm willing to roll the dice. I don't know how the dice are going to land, but I'm willing to roll the dice and bless you with the beautiful gift of motherhood and us to start a family together. And several months later, we were pregnant, and it was a great pregnancy. Women are amazing. I take my hat off to women. Men could never do this. So there's no way I could do this. But she's showing up in a way I'm so proud of her. I fell in love with her all over again, watching her go through the pregnancy and the delivery of our child and watching her be a new mom. But it's been great, man. My patience level is times 10. I'm at a different space. Obviously, it's 20 years later. So growing up with my daughter in my 20s and 30s, hustle and bustle of finding yourself while you're having a kid. I was divorced. That's much different than now being a little bit more settled. I don't have everything figured out, but at least I'm very clear as to the direction that I'm going personally and professionally. So it allows me to be way more patient, way more present in his life and in my own life. And like we talked about earlier, you get to this point in life and, there's always, everyone has an expiration date. But when you get to be 50, your expiration date is it's like, whoa, shit. That could come a little, I got less years in front of me than behind me. Maybe if I'm lucky, I have, more years, but that moment alone allows me to really embrace and every single second that I have with him, whether he's crying, whether he's hungry, whether he's sleeping, whatever he's doing, I embrace every single second that I can spend a moment with this little guy. And it brings me great joy. And I've noticed that going throughout my days, you walk out to this game of life and you got to put your armor on to go play this game of life. And it's the best feeling in the world when I get to come home every single day. My daughter's in town for college, so I get both my kids at home. I take my armor off. I could be Papa on the couch, eating a bag of chips, watching SWAT, just sitting back doing whatever, just some chill stuff, man. But it's by far my best and biggest accomplishment. And what I look forward to every single day more than anything is being a dad. I even often introduce myself like that because our world is so accustomed to being like, hey, how you doing? What do you do? And instantly we get, pigeonholed into this. Oh, I show up as a designer. Okay. Instantly they look at me like this. But when I say, I'm a dad. That's what I do. I'm a dad. And I do a few cool things on the side to make a little bit of bread. So that's what that's pulling my way into it.
Yeah. I think that's so special. And I was also thinking about how I think it's neat. I'm not a father. I hope to be one day. But I'm not right now. And yet I've gotten to experience from a kid's standpoint, as you get older, you go from your parents being these people that, through your teen years, they're kind of they control you and they hold you back and all of these things. And, you have different relationships with your parents. And then you get to the point where you start to become an adult yourself and you get to view your parents in a new way. For me, it's been in a very positive way. You get to develop a real relationship with them. Like, hey, now we're two adults going through the world and you can just meet them in a very different way. And I think about you, I think about your daughter, Nadia, and the fact that she, yes, you talk about these different versions of you that have been there. And you may have been raising her more in that version of you that was in that kind of, hustling mode. And yet how cool is it that now she starts to become an adult and come into her own and she gets to interact with this current version of who you are as well. And she gets to see all versions of you. And I just think that that's such a cool thing as kids to see these different versions of our parents and see how they evolve. I've got to imagine as a parent, you get to see different versions of how your kids evolve. And I just think that's a really, really special dynamic in relationship.
It's a good way of looking at it too, man. I really think about it that way, that my daughter gets to see me in a different light also. So that's actually, that's something I'll pay more attention to because I didn't realize that you're right. She's looking like, look, I've had you like this for 21 years. Now you're going into a new phase. She gets to sit back and watch that and be a part of it. So that's glad you brought that to the table. That's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, man, I think that's really special. But before we wrap up, the coaching, this has become something that's newer for you, as I understand it, right? Talk to me a little bit about we've heard and we've talked about this gift of providing inspiration to people and communicating with people and sharing some of these. You've got all these different disciplines that you've employed in your life and these things that you've learned. What led you to wanting to coach?
Yeah, so with we've spoken about it, and during this conversation, is I know what it's like to be on the stalled side and facing fear head on and not making a move. And I also know what it's like to say, fuck fear and do it anyway. And looking at the views from the breathtaking views of the highs. So I know the breathtaking views of the highs and I also know the heartbreaking views from the lows. I know both sides. So I felt like I was very qualified to help people to transition to build more of a fulfilled, purposeful life because I'm living it myself. I've been in jobs that I've not liked. I've been in careers that I've not liked. And I've taken the stance of saying, I'm not doing this shit anymore. I'm going to pursue the thing that I love, which is the life that I'm living right now. I'm designing hotels in rural markets in Austin, Texas right now. It's my dream life. I also know what it was like prior to this dream life to go to a job every single day that I really particularly didn't care for the actual industry. Loved the people that I worked with, loved the people that I worked for, didn't particularly care for the industry, but I stayed in it for a long period of time and breaking from that and going to the other side, transitioning. What a fulfilled moment for me. Again, I get a chance to recreate myself so many times in this lifetime. And now I'm living this great, positive, fulfilled life that I want to help people get to that space. A lot of it is mindset work. We spent about 8 weeks together. About the first 3 weeks is strictly on mindset shifting, talking about some of the things, talking about your ultimate outcomes. And then once we get a little bit further into the program, we start to put an action plan together and your why and, all the things that you got to do and how you can make this into small bite-sized pieces to accomplish your goal. So I'm not doing it for the masses. I'm not trying to pick up 1,000 clients. I'm trying to pick up a few great, highly motivated people who actually are at a stage in their life where they're really ready to make a change. And it's been very fulfilling with me also, again, to receive the gift. And now I get to give it away. We start to see the same pattern throughout this whole conversation. Receive the gift. I understand it as a gift. Respect it as a gift. It's my obligation to help somebody else do the same thing. So that's what the coaching does for me.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. If people were interested in your coaching or just interested in connecting with you or finding you, what are some ways that they might be able to learn more about you?
Sure. My feed is all the same. I am PJ Jenkins Jr. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, it's all the same. PJ Jenkins Jr. at Gmail. Hit me up on that too. But any of my feeds, hit me up. I get back to everybody. It's me. It's everybody working for me or with me. It's always me you talk to. If you want a book, hit me up. Shoot me a DM. I'll send you one for free.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Well, thank you for investing time with me. These conversations, they light me up. I share your desire for substance, and so yeah. I just appreciate that people like you exist and are willing to meet me in this space. So thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your story. I value it and appreciate it.
Thank you, man. This was great, man. Just how we even met, just the organic flow of how we met. I appreciate that we've stayed in touch and your, authenticity and how you're rolling, man, how you show up every single day, man. I watch it from afar, from your social feeds, but I'm truly grateful to be friends with you, man, and love the journey that you and your wife are on, man. Appreciate it.
My friends, thanks as always for tuning in. Did you enjoy the conversation? Did you take as much out of it as I did? If there was something that you took away, feel free to head to @ALevelDeeper on Instagram and A Level Deeper Podcast on Facebook. Would love to hear some of your thoughts on the show. If you want to email me directly, you can find my contact information via the contact form on my website, chadmmiles.com. If you found this conversation valuable, if it shifted something for you, a perspective, made you think differently about something, I'd ask you to consider sharing it with someone. Is there someone in your life who you think would benefit from also hearing this conversation? Send them the link. I'd really appreciate it. They would probably really appreciate it. And we can continue to grow this community of people who are approaching life in a meaningful way. Okay, see you next week.